Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So, with Britain's steel industry in such a parlous state, the IPPR think tank estimates that at least 40,000 jobs are at risk, both directly in steel and other industries that rely on it. Yet Britain has been far less successful than other EU countries at preserving those jobs. Our business correspondent Helia Ibrahimi explains.
China, the modern home of global steel, but also tagged as the global villain, dumping cheap metal into foreign markets, including the UK's. 10 years ago, it kicked off a global supercycle in commodities as it hurriedly rushed to build new cities, roads and airports. From Brazil to Australia, mines were expanded to accommodate China's economic explosion. But now that boom has stuttered into a series of economic blips. The mines have continued to produce metals to an oversupplied market. The home of steel now overflowing, sending a tidal wave weighing 107 million tons into the rest of the world. In the world of steel, the UK is now a minnow, producing just 10.9 million tons last year. Chinese excess capacity is a startling 400 million tons. That's 36 times the size of the UK industry. It's more than twice the demand in the whole of the European Union. Some in the industry think the issue with steel dumping is related to the need for higher tariffs.
When I look around the world at some of the tariff regimes imposed by India, Korea, the United States, a case in point, which I think is nudging 260%, I think there's a greater opportunity for applying greater tariffs, and indeed the European Commission is supporting that, and we should support them in turn.
But be careful what you wish for. While the US has been swift to up protectionist measures against Chinese dumping this time round, history is littered with examples of tariff surges going disastrously wrong. Take President Bush's 2002 move to increase charges on steel imports. In less than a year, he was forced into a humiliating U-turn after US car makers were brought to their knees and the World Trade Organization threatened a $2.2 billion fine. But the debate on tariffs is as complex as the steel business itself. The reality is that UK steel is not one industry, but three. The initial phase transforms iron ore into lumps of steel with blast furnaces. It's this segment that faces the most dire problems because of the huge costs associated with heating the furnaces. Port Talbot includes a blast furnace. Next is the rolling mills, which turn steel into sheets and rolls for production, like Scunthorpe. Then finally, there's the end-stage steel plants, which turn steel coils or pipes into components for the aerospace or the car industry. But while it's possible to see a viable long-term future for at least part of the steel industry, it faces some enormous short-term challenges that may stop it getting there.
Well, Helia is with me now. I mean, Helia, I have to say, looking at the challenges you just described in your piece, it's hard to imagine anyone wanting to take on this business.
Look, I mean, the steel industry in the UK is still pretty big. It contributes £10 billion to GDP, employs 26,000 people directly. But it is caught in this perfect storm of global headwinds, like the Chinese dumping, and some very serious challenges at home. Most notably, the fact that electricity costs were 82% higher in the UK than they were across Europe. Now, that's going to change as of tomorrow, but it's still going to be twice as expensive to run a plant in the UK than it is in Germany. That's not sustainable, not even in the short term when you think Port Talbot loses £1 million every day.
So do we know who the potential buyers might be?
I mean, look, the buyers are few and far between because everyone is facing these global headwinds exactly the same, but there are players out there. People like Greybull Capital, which is a private equity turnaround specialist, people like Liberty House, a steel company, have been very active in this space. But I spoke to one potential buyer for Port Talbot tonight, and he said to me the issue remains energy costs. They want to know what is the government going to do to reduce this, because commercial players might be interested in rolling mills, in that very high-tech end of the steel industry. But when it comes to blast furnaces, it's really going to be for the government to step in there and decide, are they going to rescue it, and is it worth rescuing?
Helen, thanks very much. John.
Well, we were hoping to speak with the Business Minister, Anna Soubry, but she suddenly became unavailable an hour before the programme.